Hello, everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan. A lot of news to cover this week, including the second weekend of Tenet here at the domestic box office, and Mulan makes its debut in China, but things didn't exactly go the way that Disney planned. We're going to cover all of that, starting with the domestic top 5, and as I mentioned, Tenet is in its second week of release. It was number 1 at the box office right now with an estimated $6.7 million. This comes from Warner Brothers. We're going to talk about how these numbers are being reported in just a minute because it's some very interesting developments around that. You see the New Mutants there at number 2 and Unhinged at number 3. The Broken Hearts Gallery, which is a movie from Sony that was delayed a couple of times, opens there at number 4. And then Bill and Ted Face the Music, despite being available on paid video on demand, premium video on demand, is still number 5 there with $260,000. Now, I mentioned that Tenet's second weekend number, when we looked at that $6.7 million, Warner Brothers reported that as a drop-off around 30% from last week. However, we didn't really know what last weekend's numbers were because Warner Brothers reported the number that was the opening weekend in Canada, the movie's previews leading up to its opening weekend, and then the weekend number as one number, the $20.2 million number that we knew last week. So we knew that Tenet made $20.2 million, but we didn't really know how that broke down. Given the reporting that Warner Brothers has done now based on this weekend's number, we can now backtrack, and others have, and estimate that Tenet did around $11 million-ish last weekend in the 3-day weekend, which a smaller number probably than Warner Brothers wanted to report. That's why they reported the $20.2 million number. It's a much higher number. It encompasses more days, but they can still report it as an opening weekend gross. But it brings up something that has been talked about this week and that actually has the potential to change how box office is covered, which is that Warner Brothers has not been sharing the box office data for Tenet in the way that studios usually do. And the way that the system usually works, when we talk about estimates and where estimates come from, those are self-reported estimates from the studios. Although when you look and when you read the stories about a movie opening, they'll say something like Warner Brothers estimates that this movie did $17.6 million. Rival studios estimated it closer to 17.2. The reason why you can have two different estimates for that is that usually the box office numbers are fed hourly into a service called Rentrack. It recently was consolidated with another company called ComScore. You'll see a lot of times, not right now because that data is not really being updated at the moment, which is kind of what this is about. ComScore is the source that I use for a lot of international data. So there are forward-facing things that everybody can access, but Rentrack is a service that in the before times, a studio would report their grosses hourly over the weekend so that you could see how a movie was literally doing almost in real time. Now, that's not forward-facing. That would be something at a premium level that the studios would buy into so that Warner Brothers is feeding in their data hourly. Every other major studio can see how Tenet or whatever movie it would be is doing on an hour-by-hour basis. So Warner Brothers could estimate that the movie's going to do this much on the opening weekend, but another studio could look at the hourly figures from that movie and estimate that it's going to do maybe a lower number. This is something it's been this way forever. However, Warner Brothers decided not to enter that information for Tenet last weekend. Reportedly, a lot of the other studios agreed to this, saying, you're kind of taking the bullet for us. This is the first major movie to come out since movies have stopped coming out. So if you don't want to put in your hourly data, that's fine. You don't have to. We will concede that you will kind of control the narrative for this, and we're not going to know in real time how your movie's doing. It's not a direct comparison anyway. However, Warner Brothers has since declined after the opening weekend to enter that data. And Sony, with the Broken Hearts Gallery, which we just saw came out this weekend, followed suit. So now the rival studios reportedly are losing a little bit of patience because they use that data themselves to track their own releases, to see how people are reacting to a movie. And for studios that are going to be putting movies out later, they want to know how many people are showing up on Friday and at what time, how many people are showing up on Saturday. And by withholding that data, essentially Warner Brothers is able to contain the entire narrative of how Tenet is doing because they can just report one number at the end of the weekend. That's how it did. You don't know what it did on Friday. You don't know what it did on Saturday. You don't know what it did on Sunday. You just know how much it did. And that is a radical change from the way that box office data has been gathered and has been reported now for decades. And so I think really there's one of two different ways to look at this situation. Number one is Warner Brothers and now Sony, who's joining in on Warner Brothers' strategy. They're in a very difficult position, and you should grant them a little leeway in not reporting hourly data, because it's true. If the numbers are low, people could take that information and spin it more negatively for the studio and kind of discount the challenges that they have to face with not as many theaters being open, smaller theater capacities, etc. Or you could take it to mean that studios could potentially use this as precedent to change the way that they report numbers going forward and just report that end of the weekend number, or selectively report what daily numbers they want to make their releases look better, or at least keep them from looking worse. So this is something to keep, and it's a very broccoli story. I get this. It's a very business-oriented story, but it's fascinating to me because it changes the way that we look at the numbers and the way that the numbers are reported. So this is something that we can watch. It's very possible that in a few months, when things get closer to some sort of normal, that we're going to see reporting to these services resume as they normally did. Who knows when the number of movies that come out will be anything close to normal again, though? That's another big question. Tenet did have, as I mentioned, it had a drop around the 30% range this weekend. One big concession that Warner Brothers did make, however, was that it allowed Tenet to play in drive-in theaters in the Los Angeles area. So that was a market that they had previously said would be closed if indoor theaters were closed. Warner Brothers had said that you cannot play Tenet at a drive-in theater. In the Los Angeles area, Tenet was allowed to play this past weekend. So it was a drop-off, but you have to think that there was a surge of money from the Los Angeles metro area that was not there last weekend. Indoor theaters in Orange County, which is just south of us here in Los Angeles, were also allowed to open this past weekend. Theaters in San Diego are opening. So there is some money trickling in from the Southern California area, certainly not at the volume that it would be, but that'll be interesting to see. Did we already get the big surge from the Los Angeles metro area, or is that going to play out over the next few weekends? Tenet will be an interesting one to watch. Warner Brothers has stated that they want to go with this marathon approach. The early results thus far have not been exceedingly positive, in the sense that it's not an A+ with people going back, but there's still lots of theaters closed. Domestically, we're not really going to know the story on Tenet for quite a while. We're going to have to see how long it plays out. The ability for it to play out did increase by quite a bit with another development that happened this week that we'll cover in just a second. But first, we actually have some movement on the 2020 charts. As a matter of fact, here's the 2020 domestic chart, and this is the first time I have updated this chart since I started this show on the channel. This is the first change I've made to it here in the Charts with Dan era. Now, 1 through 8, those numbers are the same because there have not been updated totals for these films, like Invisible Man and Sonic the Hedgehog, which did play drive-in, so I know that there are definitely some updated totals for these movies. They have not been updated, but what we do know is that Tenet is now the 9th highest grossing domestic film at the box office in 2020. It jumps over Fantasy Island like a boss, which perhaps had hoped to cling on to that 10th spot throughout the rest of the year, drops out. So Tenet now in the domestic top 10 for 2020. And again, Warner Brothers' hope is that that is going to slowly crawl up that chart by keeping the losses from falling too much weekend by weekend and taking advantage of other markets that aren't open yet. Markets like New York, we don't know when that's going to open. We have no idea when that's going to open. We have no idea when indoor theaters in Los Angeles may open. So there's a lot of work left to do. Warner Brothers obviously hoping that Tenet is just going to at a snail's pace climb up that chart. Let's see what the 2020 worldwide box office looks like. And Tenet jumps into the top 5. It has now cleared $200 million at number 5, just below Dolittle. It jumps over Birds of Prey and the blah, 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 Harley Quinn, etc. It's Invisible Man, Onward, The Gentleman Called the Wild. Nothing else really changes except that Tenet is now at that number 5 spot. Again, with Warner Brothers, they're going to want it climbing up because Tenet is about a $200 million movie. For break even, they want that to get up to $400 million. And that's where you could marginally start saying that it actually made its money back. That, looking at the markets where it's open, looking at what it's made here in the United States so far, I think that's a tall order. I honestly think that it's a tall order to get Tenet up to that $400 million break-even point. However, we are in unprecedented times. It may leg out in a way that we have never seen before because of the schedule. It's certainly going to be in a release pattern for many, many months now. So it could definitely do it. But the idea, I think, that Tenet is going to be a massive worldwide hit, I honestly think is off the table for right now, unless there's some kind of a radical marketing strategy that happens where it comes back or something like that. I think that Tenet is going to be an exhibitor play where Warner Brothers said, hey, listen, we didn't necessarily make a lot of money with this movie, but we made our mark. We were the first big movie back. We brought people back to the theater, and that's how we played our role. And then perhaps, and I think this is possible, very likely, there would be hope to make up some of that shortfall in VOD, digital home media sales, Blu-ray, etc., for people that didn't go out to the theaters. I would imagine those margins would probably be a little bit higher than it would be on an average Nolan movie, or if Tenet had come out in a time where none of this had happened. So the price and the profit, etc., structure is all out of whack at this point. But Tenet has cracked $200 million worldwide. We'll see how it continues to do. I mentioned that there is some news that clears the way for Tenet to have the box office to itself, which it already was going to. Tenet was going to have the box office to itself up until Wonder Woman came out in October. Well, Wonder Woman is no longer coming out in October because Warner Brothers announced that they are pushing the film to Christmas, December 25th. So now this is, I just made this a couple of weeks ago, the select movie release schedule for movies coming up or movies that were planned to come out. I just made this a few weeks ago, and already we're X'd out all the way, and this isn't every single movie, but the next major release scheduled to hit theaters is now Death on the Nile on October 23rd. Wonder Woman was scheduled to come out on October 2nd. It has been moved to Christmas Day. And then Candyman, which would have been next in line and had already been moved back to October 16th to fill in the spot left open by Halloween Kills. Candyman has been moved to a date in 2021 that is TBD. So now the next major release, at least major studio release, unless Fox and Disney decide to push it back, is October 23rd's Death on the Nile. Then we have Black Widow on November 6th and No Time to Die and Soul scheduled for November. But Tenet has an even clearer runway at the moment because Wonder Woman was the next big movie to hit. It is not going to hit. Warner Brothers says that even though Wonder Woman is hitting on December 25th, right now they're saying that does not impact the opening date of Dune, which is another big budget movie for them that is scheduled to open a week before Wonder Woman. The studio has expressed confidence, reportedly, that they believe that the Christmas marketplace can hold up to tentpole films. We'll see. I'm not sold. We'll see. There was something that I wanted to point out too, though, which was there's an older version of that schedule that I started a few months ago when things started to get pushed or when we thought we knew what the summer release schedule, and there's a little bit of irony in this schedule. So this is the first page of the select movie release schedule that I made several months ago. And when you look at the top, Unhinged, and look at me, it's all scribbles at this point. This was updated in real time with Unhinged, and it went to August, and Tenet moved to September, and Antebellum went to VOD. It hits VOD on Friday, and Mulan, Bill and Ted was moving around, Quiet Place and Conjuring, Kingsman, Candyman, Wonder Woman 1984. Look at the irony, though. The only movie that did not change its release date on this entire page is The New Mutants. This is the world that we live in, folks. The world has literally turned upside down with the movements of Candyman and Wonder Woman 1984. We now have the stable movie in this whole 2020 pandemic was New Mutants, who once it staked that August 28th date, stuck to that date and came out. It is now playing in theaters. So that's how crazy things have gotten. That The New Mutants is the most stable major studio release that we've had in the last several months. And I'm sure more to come. So I mentioned when we're looking at the 2020 worldwide box office, which we did just a second ago, one movie that has not made that chart yet, and it would have to make about $100 million in order to do that, is Mulan. Now, Mulan, as we covered on the show and mentioned several times, will not be hitting theaters here in North America or in any market that has Disney Plus. Disney is offering that movie for a premium rental price of $30 until December 4th, in which case it will be, at which time I should say, it will be available to all Disney Plus subscribers. So we don't really know what the theatrical marketplace in those markets is going to hold, but it did open in a huge marketplace, and one that Disney was obviously pinning a lot of hopes on to make some money, which was China. It opened in China this previous weekend, and things did not go as planned for Disney. As a matter of fact, Mulan opened with about $23 million this past weekend. That's not the number that Disney wanted. For comparison, The Last Jedi and Star Wars films, particularly the newer Star Wars films, have not hit with audiences in China. The Last Jedi opened higher than that at $28 million and ended its run in China with about $42 million. So based on that performance, I think it's very possible that Mulan ends its Chinese run with definitely less than $50, maybe less than $40 million. I don't think that there's any spin on that number. That is not what Disney wanted in any way, shape, or form, especially a movie that is about Chinese mythology. It's set in China. I'm sure they were looking for a huge number. So the question becomes, what happened? Why did Mulan do so badly in China, which to Disney, you would think they would want that to be their number one market, maybe even bigger than North America? Well, there's a couple reasons. When you look at Douban, which is China's basic equivalent of IMDb, the scores for Mulan are not great. It's currently sitting at a 4.9, which is very mediocre. And we've talked about the way that the Chinese theatrical marketplace works, which is that it's a very, except for local films oftentimes, but particularly with films from Hollywood studios, it is a very short runway. You make a burst of money and then it runs out quickly because the next movie is coming in to take its place. So you don't want that kind of score, a 4.9, on your opening weekend, because that means what little interest there is on opening weekend is going to dissipate rapidly. That's just how the Chinese box office works. There's not necessarily so much of that long running over many, many, many weeks. You don't see that very often. So Chinese audiences obviously not reacting to the film in an extraordinarily positive manner. So what is it about Mulan? Obviously Disney thought they had something there. They spent $200 million to make this movie. What is it about this movie that didn't connect? Well, I was doing some reading, some different reports, and it looks like it could have been a number of factors. One of them is, it seems like there's a general apathy from many people in China around the star of the film, Liu Yifei, which not related to the statements that she made about the protesting in Hong Kong, which were very controversial, both amongst people that were sympathetic to the Hong Kong protests and many people here in North America and elsewhere around the world. Generally, though, it seemed like there were some people that just didn't like her casting in the movie. They just didn't particularly think that she was the right choice for Mulan based on the other films that she's done in China. So the star of the film perhaps drove some people away from the movie. I was reading some disappointment in the fight scenes and the choreography. Of course, Chinese films have a long and a very rich history of fight choreography and well-made action sequences. They didn't feel that it lived up to the standard of the country. And then from several sources I was reading, some reviewers in China, feedback from people that saw the movie, they just felt like Disney did a poor job of trying to sell their own culture to them. They felt like the version of Chinese culture that Disney put on screen was historically inaccurate, not really true to the modern day values, outdated in many senses. It seems like to certain Chinese audiences, Mulan felt like that they were being pandered to. I guess would really be what it comes down to, is that Disney pandered to them, and many audience members did not react kindly to that. And obviously that's not what Disney wanted. Disney would have wanted a huge hit, but sometimes it's you see that so many times when a film is trying so hard to hit a certain audience and is tailoring making itself for that audience. A lot of times that audience will sense that and say like, well, you're trying too hard, and when you and not only are you trying too hard, but you don't understand it and you don't get it, and so they reject it. That seems to be a little bit of what's going on with Mulan in China. Not helping the matters was the fact that there was an avalanche of press coverage following its release here in North America and in a lot of markets with Disney Plus, but prior to its release in China, due to some thanks that were being given in the credits to particular government agencies in particular regions in China that have been accused of some really heinous atrocities. Obviously, the Chinese media heavily censored. Most of the press coverage around Mulan reportedly was censored in the week leading up to the movie's release. So obviously, if you have a big movie opening in a country, you don't want the media coverage around that movie to be absent, to be gone. So the controversy that Mulan found itself involved in here and in other places around the world did have an impact on how the movie was covered in China, possibly how the word of mouth got out, how many people knew about the movie. So things went very badly for Disney with this movie. They went very badly fairly quickly with Mulan. This is not a good number, and so now they're even more reliant on this premium video on demand option, this $30 option. So now even more so, our attention turns to what those numbers are going to be. The thing being, we're not going to really know what they are until, number one, Disney decides that they're impressive enough to release the numbers, or number two, there's some kind of a earnings call or stock report that requires them to say how profitable certain aspects of their business are when they would reveal what the economics are like on Mulan. Because again, $200 million is not a small amount of change. We still don't really know how Hamilton did, and all indications was that it was a great success, but that was a $75 million investment. Artemis Fowl was a $100+ million investment. A lot of Disney's money is tied up in Disney Plus right now, and we may not really know how Mulan did for quite a while, because with these numbers, that is 100% in Disney's control. It's not even like reporting the box office, because at least there you do have some pressure from the media or some pressure from rival studios to reveal those numbers. No such pressure for Disney to reveal what those Mulan numbers are. We may be in a situation where we never really know how well Mulan did, other than that it disappointed in China. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. It's an answer that may come in a few months. It's an answer that may come never. However, a bit of a misfire, actually. More than a bit of a misfire, I think, with Mulan in China for Disney. It was perhaps a gamble that I would wager to say did not pay off, but we will see if we ever find out what the Disney Plus numbers are to see how that movie truly did. Well, other than Mulan, let's see what people are watching as they're at home. Let's check out the streaming charts, because even though there are some movies in theaters, I think there are a lot of people that are still at home watching movies. And let's check out, first of all, what is number one over on Amazon, and that continues to be Guest House, the new Pauly Shore movie. That's a strange sentence to say in the year 2020. The new Pauly Shore movie, Guest House, followed by Bill and Ted Face the Music, Rogue, The Karate Kid from 1984, Black Panther, The King of Staten Island, Spectre, and Trolls World Tour. Those are all holdovers from last week. And then at number 9, we have the Divergent series, Insurgent. I guess the people want to get their YA on. And then, because we just recently passed the 19th anniversary of September 11th here in the United States, 9/11, the filmmakers edition, is there at number 10. That is an extremely powerful documentary footage taken on literally at ground zero as things were happening. It is a very powerful film that people are obviously choosing to revisit as we've just passed that anniversary for the September 11th attacks in New York and Pennsylvania and Washington. Let's look at the top 10 over on iTunes. At number 1 is Sniper, Assassin's End, which really hits, it's the lotto right there. It's a 99-cent rental, and it's a 2020 movie, so it's almost destined to be number 1. At number 2 is Irresistible, followed by The King of Staten Island and The Second. Those are all holdovers. At number 5 is Force of Nature. It's a Mel Gibson movie that came out earlier this year. It was also a 99-cent rental, which is why it's there at number 5. I'm sure a big reason why. Then Bill and Ted Face the Music at number 6. Unfit, which is a documentary surrounding the President of the United States, is at number 7. Then The Silencing at number 8. And 2 films coming back. One of them, Made in Italy, was on the charts earlier this summer. And then the Kingsman 2 movie collection there at number 10. Perhaps once the Kingsman got pushed, people realized they were going to have to wait a while to get their Kingsman fix. Decided to watch the 2 movie collection for Kingsman. And let's look at the top 10 over on Netflix. There's a lot of changeover right now. At number 1 is Pets United, which is a co-production by Germany, the UK, and China. It's an animated film. was released in China last year. It was added to Netflix on Friday. It's at number 1. Then we have The Babysitter Killer Queen, which is a sequel to a McGee's movie that people was kind of a surprise Netflix hit a couple years ago. There's a sequel that came out. That's there at number 2. At number 3 is The Social Dilemma, which is a documentary I've heard some great things about social networks and how they've changed how we behave and how we react to things. Perhaps appropriate then that it's right above number 4, which is a movie that has been consumed in a firestorm of controversy for a few weeks now, which is Cuties at number 4. Obviously, some curiosity driving people to check that out. Hashtag Alive, a zombie movie from South Korea, is there at number 5. Then at number 6 is Dad Wanted. That's a film from Mexico. So the top 6 are all new films. Then at number 7, Love Guaranteed. At number 8, How to Train Your Dragon 2 pops back up on the chart. And then number 9 and number 10 are both holdovers from last week, Due Date and The Smurfs. So kind of a cross-section of genres there on the streaming charts. So that's all I've got for you for the box office numbers for this week. As we go forward, next week we will be looking at what numbers we can get out of China regarding the second weekend of Mulan. A lot of times, keep in mind that we've seen 60-70% fall-offs. Does the smaller debut perhaps indicate that there will be a bit of a longer leg for Mulan in China? We'll see. We'll also track Tenet and see how Tenet is doing, along with New Mutants Unhinged and all the other films in theaters. So we'll keep tracking that. Of course, we'll keep tracking the streaming charts and any new box office data that breaks or box office information, release date changes. We cover it all here on the channel. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see even more of what I'm up to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We added a bunch of new features this week that I'm really excited about. A monthly watch along, which we just did this past week. There are exclusive, I just did a recap of my Schmodown match against Ben Bateman. Just kind of a follow me, just taking you through every bit of the match piece by piece. That just went live today. That's for all patrons. You can check that out. I'm also doing Schmodown commentaries, going back and rewatching all my old matches and giving commentary. I do 2 different commentary tracks every month. For my director level, I do one that I choose. For my producers, I do one that they choose. There's so much fun stuff going on over there. I'd love to have you part of the film crew. And I want to thank these producer level parts of the film crew. These are such great folks. And it's been so great to meet new people, to see familiar faces. But my producers really do help keep the engine running over on the Patreon page. So thank you so much to these folks. Also, check me out on Instagram and on Twitter at Murrell Dan. Always trying to do some fun and different and cool stuff there. And don't forget to check out here on the channel as well. In addition to the box office stuff, I've got news, reviews, whatever's breaking, whatever I feel like doing, really, I do right here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.